that's, say, an overview of books 18 to 21. In the last lecture, we will look at books 22 to 24, the close of the epic. So book 22 is the death of Hector. And then we'll look in book 24 at the journey of Priam to go ransom the body of Hector at the tent of Achilles, and the famous scene there. So let's pause there. Are there any questions or comments on either the books we've just read, or comments on, or questions on the work as a whole?
Yes, Professor, I do.
Go ahead. Is this Caleb?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
So it's not really much of like a question, mostly just an observation, sort of, from what I've heard and from what I've seen from reading the books. I feel as though that like Homer and his whole like Iliad as a whole is mostly, I think it glorifies war in a sense, because if you really look at how he paints the pictures of it, it makes it almost as if it's like it's like for me, it almost makes me want to be back in those times to join their fight and stuff like that, for all those glories and all those honors and stuff like that. And my question is that the way he intended it to be seen, or is that just how I'm viewing it?
Okay, well, those are it's a good question. So I think the first question, let's start with whether it's glorifying or not, so how it appears, and then we'll look at the intention aspect. So so I would say, I think you're right. I think there's a certain amount of glorifying war, in the sense that let's sing about these great feats of these great warriors that were before us, and these were ancestors that were greater than our generation, is kind of a theme he reiterates. It's part of the glory culture that I've talked about, where the great feats of heroes in the past need to be sung. At the same time, I would say there are subtle, let's say, undercuts against that, right? There's subtle, there'll be scenes where war is the bringer of death to men, and it's a reminder of how it destroys lives, destroys families. I think the reason we get depictions of the life in Troy is to show what war is costing. I think those depictions, those haunting scenes in Troy, where the family that Hector is about to abandon because we know he's going to die, and then we know the fates of Andromache and Astyanax. Remember those fates. We know those fates. We know that Andromache is going to be sold into slavery. We know Astyanax will be thrown from the wall to his death. It's a little baby, 1 or 2 years old. So I think, and then what we'll also see in book 24, the last substantial lines, like the last substantive speeches, are from the Trojan women, those who are suffering from the loss of all these great heroes that have been cut down by Achilles and the Greeks, and the fact that they know they're going to be sold into slavery. They know their kids are going to be killed. So the last lines are of these suffering victims. The last lines could have been, Diomedes or Agamemnon saying, Achilles, you truly are the greatest. You're such a great warrior, and it's so noble what you did. You killed Hector, who was a great warrior. That was so noble that your song will be sung forever. But the last lines are not that. The last lines are the lines of women lamenting the fact that Hector's gone, lamenting their futures. So I think it's really tough to come down. I think like the shield, it shows a balanced portrait. It shows, that this is part of, there's city at war, but there's also city at peace. We need both. And the poem shows it both as good and bad. And this is, as bringing pain and bringing blessings, but also pain and misery. In terms of the
So,
intent, sorry, I'll just follow up just on the intention question. The intention question's tougher. Remember the lecture on the introduction to Homer. Okay, so we're not exactly sure, was this the last words he wanted? It's an oral tradition. We
mhm.
don't and we don't know, let's say, at what point he was writing and that kind of thing. So what he intended is, it's more he as a person, let's say a conscious artist writing, is more difficult to articulate. But what we do have is this work, let's say, and what we can see in the work, I would say, is both a glorification and a pointing out of its limits, and pointing out of how it can bring suffering as well. I don't know. Does that make sense, Caleb?
Yes, sir. Can I just follow up on that?
Absolutely.
So, does that then mean that it's sort of like a yin and yang situation, that there needs to be a bit of war and peace for us to function as like society, or is it that we can do without one or the other? Like we can do without war and have
Yeah.
constant peace, or is it that we need both and we cannot be assured of one?
Yeah, no, I think that's an insightful question. My sense, and I invite you to kind of think on it yourselves, but my sense, as I was saying, in the Shield and in the epic, we see both, because that's part of a cosmic order and balance that is kind of this eternal cycle. Just as trees grow and flourish into life, and they're doomed to death. There's going to be life, there's going to be death. That's just part of a natural cycle. So too with peace and war. And even in peace, there's conflict that needs to be, let's say, brought into order. And then even in war, there's moments of potential peace that could be squashed. So the yin yang comparison, I think, is a good one. I think it's part of, well, the Greek notion of kind of the balance of the cosmos. It's not exactly this notion of yin yang, but their notion of the balance of the cosmos as natural cycles, let's say, of without really a history. For them, time is a circle, kind of like the seasons. Okay, so just as and people ages, they have points of ascendancy and then they decline, and there can be moments of peace and there will be war, and that's and as I said, even in the moments of peace, there's always war in the background. So yeah, no, that's the way I would see it, is that the kind of the necessity of both. I think they couldn't, for us, I think we could see a progressive notion of trying to, let's say, limit war, trying to do away with war through kind of rational agreements, and that we would progress beyond a state where we would need war. That's kind of a modern progressive mindset. For the ancients, I think there's this notion, especially for the Greeks, especially for the Homeric Greeks, is that what is great is forged in the fire of conflict. So through conflict, through war, through strife, the greatness of individual things or cultures will arise. Okay, so I think that's in the background. We have a bit of that in terms of our notion of, uh, in modern notions around a market, competition within the market will get us to the right natural price. And let's say competition of species for limited resources will get us will produce species that are best adapted to their environment, in Darwinian evolution. So there's some of that in modern thinking, but not to the extent that there is in the Greeks, where war and conflict are a necessary part of what makes someone great, a culture great, and that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. Very good questions. Are there any other questions or comments on the epic as a whole, or what we just talked about? Sydney, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I have kind of two comments, questions. I'll go with my question first. So for the assignment at the end of the week, I realize it's very short. So instead of including quotes, should we just like refer to the book or the line?
Oh, that's a really good question. I wish I should have thought of that before. I would say, unless I would refer to just the line number unless all you're quoting is 2 words, that kind of thing. So very good point, because you've only got 150 words, and if it's filled up with a quote, that's kind of cheating, so to speak. So yeah, definitely just refer to a line number. And your general argument's going to want to be more general anyway, right? So you're not going to want to or need to go into specifics with a lot of line references anyway. But if you do want to point to any line, I would just kind of cite it as a line number, as you mentioned.
Okay, thank you. And my other comment was kind of in like connecting to Caleb's. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking. um, Connecting to Caleb's comment, I noticed since the beginning of the book that since you were saying it was started out as oral storytelling
Right.
of sort of teachings about morality. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, because I know that a lot of oral storytelling was kind of trying to teach, for example, children that stealing is bad, things like this. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on the Iliad or Homer's writings doing that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So let's take an example, like one of their morals, one of their kind of enduring moral codes had to do with this concept I've talked about Xenia, right? Remember that, the guest host relationship. So in the stories, we see great examples of Xenia. So we have, let's say, positive exempla, they're called, right, in any story. So a positive example, or in the plural exempla. So we have positive and negative examples. So we have positive examples of Diomedes speaking with Glaucus and mentioning that that their ancestors had exchanged the guest host relationship in the past, and that in the future they will do, even though they're on the opposite sides of the field, right? They're about to battle one another. But yeah, don't worry. If you come by, man, you're going to get a really nice roast pig and stuff. So that's a good example. And then we have the negative example. So I mentioned quickly Agamemnon did not offer those and had to be reminded. And then in the epic that we didn't read, Odysseus, like the worst example of Xenia, the Cyclops, who is eating his guests, or the worst example of guests, the suitors who are trying to court Penelope. So that'd be one example. And then obviously, and it goes back to Caleb's point about whether we're glorifying war, obviously the whole epic in some ways is this song of Achilles, and how great Achilles is. Okay, so in one level, we're teaching, through this, we're conveying morals. We're saying, in saying that Achilles is great, what are we saying is great about Achilles? And that's where the question is. That's kind of where the meaning of the Iliad comes in. So one thing that's great about Achilles is, he didn't suffer being last. I think in the Greek sense of it was, to be better than your peers is the highest ideal. It's no sense in just being mediocre at anything you want to do. So I think that's one ideal that is definitely portrayed in Achilles, and he's very proud of wanting to be shown that, no, I am the best. Why I should have a war prize? Why do I not have a war prize? I'm obviously the best. This is not right. I will not stand for this. Whereas if he was just a different moral for us, that's why a lot of times readers today, we look at it and go, boy, Achilles is a bit of a prima donna, eh? It's like an NFL wide receiver or something, sitting with this gold chain saying, I've been disrespected. Where's my Lamborghini? So for us, maybe it stands out as a little different, but at the time, for that, let's say, moral that's being conveyed about always being the best and being proud of that, then that fits well. But then there's the other side of it, that there's not just that going on with Achilles. In the whole story, that's kind of one part of Achilles, but really about Achilles is this arc of self-realization at the end in book 24 that we see around accepting mortality, around accepting his limits. Okay, so there's that two sides to that kind of the, I would say, the moral of the epic that needs to be seen as the moral that's being conveyed. And as you rightly said, a moral that oral teachers are trying to convey to whether it's kids or other people who are listening to the story. So good question. I don't know if that's kind of what you were hitting at.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
No problem. Any other comments or questions? So a couple of great questions from Caleb and Sydney. Okay, so as Sydney reminded us, I forgot to remind you, is it this Friday or is it, when is the assignment due? I should know these things.
I think it says on the syllabus February 4th, so this Friday.
This Friday. Okay, so this Friday, you need to have your assignment 1 handed in. So handed in, that's old speak for posted on the Brightspace discussion forum. That's been set up. So start a thread under that discussion forum with 100 to 150 words. It's not that difficult. And as I said, as long as you do it, you're gonna get full marks. Don't sweat about it too much, but don't sweat about the marks, but do try to put some thought into it. Okay. Without further ado, then I'll close if there's no further comments, and I will see you next week. We already have a recorded lecture for the 5th lecture on the Iliad. It's already up there, and I'll see you next in person, so to speak, when we talk about Virgil's Aeneid next Monday. Thank you, everyone.